Hello, everyone. What I wanted to talk about this week is a follow-up to what happened to several people due to the CrowdStrike incident last week. As photographers, we have a lot of information that we need to keep either from a business perspective or we want to keep from a personal perspective. Because of that, one wonderful way to do that is called a Network Attached Storage Device, or NAS. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And the reason this is a day late is I wanted the system to show up so I could get my new one installed and give you guys a feel for what to do and how it works. So let's start off with how much did it cost. The NAS that I got cost me a grand total of just under $1,700. Now you may think $1,700 is a lot, but bear in mind, these are either your memories or memories that you need to retain for a client, at least while you're working on them, depending on how you approach the archive storage type. Now, we know as photographers that memories are precious, and we want to make sure that nothing happens to them. So there were ways in the film days of storing and preserving negatives, storing and preserving prints, right? So you've got archivist paper that you can use to help save your prints. They can be put into frames that are sealed so that the air doesn't get at them. And they can have glass put in the front to cut back on any harmful effects of them being in the sun. So there's things we used to do with just the print versions of them. We need to do the same type of thing here with the digital versions of it. So as I said, the NAS that I got is a Synology. It's a 923. It is a 4-bay system. Now, what I got was a bundled package from Adorama. Now, I use Adorama and B&H. I have credit cards at both of them, and you get benefits using those credit cards. So it's important to take advantage of anything that we can do to, make sure that we save money, but get the best quality stuff that we can get. The one that I have has 4 bays, and in the kit came with 4 12 terabyte drives. Now, actually, those are just under 11 terabytes each. I'm putting them in a RAID 5 array. Now, again, I'm using this as a backup storage, so RAID 5 will make sure that everything stays there, but it's not as performant as a different drive. So I have the set of drives that I write my data to and use those to manipulate the data, to manipulate those photos. And I have another drive that's the backups. So I have my photos, I have my backup of my photos. This is going to be the backup of the backup, if you will. It's also going to have the catalogs and a few other Lightroom specific things to it. So you might be thinking in your head, okay, so even at 11 terabytes each, that's 44 terabytes worth of storage. Not quite. Because it's a RAID 5, the way that works is the data doesn't get written to a drive that fills up and then goes to the next drive and fills up and the next drive. It gets striped across all 4 of them. And the reason that's important is when you lose a drive, you're able to restore by just popping out that drive, putting a new drive in, and let the system heal itself. The data is stretched out and done in such a way that it can recover a drive. Now that includes a call. So remember I said that 12 terabytes isn't really 12 terabytes of space. It's 10.9 terabytes. We're going to use 11 for ease of calculations here. So of that 44 terabytes, I'm going to keep 31 terabytes of space that I can use. So I lost 13 terabytes, or about a drive worth of data that won't be available to me. But that means that if a drive fails, I can pop it out and put it back in. Okay. So now that we talked about RAID 5 and the reason I'm doing RAID 5, let's talk about what you do when the unit arrives. So the first thing you want to do when a unit like this arrives. Now, Synology is what I'm using because it's very simple to set up. It basically has its own operating system on it. You hook it up to your network. Go to that IP address. It'll go, hey, I'm here. Do you want me to install? And it'll install its operating system across the drives because the computer on there and the firmware knows what it wants to do, and it's going to handle the drives for you. It'll handle the RAID. It'll handle optimizing the drives. It'll handle cleaning the drives up. So everything is handled for you. All right, so it makes it very simple to use these units. But when it first shows up, of course, the first thing you're going to do with anything that shows up is make sure that it didn't get damaged in transit. Now, the next thing I want you to do, we're going to use this as an example. There were 4 drives. The kit does not come assembled. It's not a pre-built unit. You're going to have to put it together. So the first thing you're going to want to do is turn over all those drive boxes and look at the bottom, and there's a serial number. Get your camera out, take a picture of all those serial numbers. You're going to need those later on. If you have warranties or if you have any claims against them, you're going to need those serial numbers. In addition to that, the unit itself has a serial number. Take a picture of that. That way you have a visual record of them, and if you want to copy it down someplace else, you don't have to worry about what happens to the box when you open it up or anything. You currently have all that information. The next thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a little bag or a box for the trash, and another little box for the pieces that come with it. Now, the Synology I got in the United States has a little bag with its power cord in it, and I was able to use the bag for the little bits. Now, what are the little bits? These are 3.5-inch drives. Because of that, you don't need the little bit of screws that came with the Synology unit. So you got a bag of little screws that you can save for later on. In addition, each one of the drives comes with a set of screws. You can throw those in there. It came with 2 Ethernet cables. Because of where I've got it, I needed a longer cable, so those cables are in the bag. And it comes with a little key. So all of that stuff goes into the bag. Your unit itself is going to have a power adapter, and it has 2 Ethernet ports on the back so that you can plug in, and I believe it combines the 2 so that you can get 2 gigabytes worth of throughput into the unit. Once you've got all those in place, you're going to pop each of these little bays open. Now, the way the bays work is they just have a little piece at the bottom you pop up. The tray slides out. It's a plastic tray. You're going to pop the things off the side, slide your drive in. Now, the way the drive goes into the frame is face up. All right, so you're going to see the label of the drive when you slide it in. And all drives have little screw holes on the side, but because of the way this is set up, it actually has 2 little plastic frames on the side that you pop off before you start, slide the drive in, you pop those in, those hold the drive into place. You just take that drive around, slide it back into your unit. I usually set my units up on the back, so it's just easier to slide those in and click it back into place. That's it. That's all it takes to put the drives in. So you go across those 4 drives. So there's no tools required. There's no expertise required. You're just going to put the drives in there, which means that if one of those drives fails, you're just going to do the opposite. You're going to pop that drive out, pull the bottom tab open, pull it up. It'll slide the drive out. Take that drive out, pop the sides off, pop the new drive in, pop those sides back in place, slide it in, and let the unit take care of it for you. Okay? This is not something you have to be technical for. This is not something you need tools for. It's just very easy to put the thing together and go. I also want to say that it's probably a good idea to make sure that you've got warranties on everything and extend your warranties on your NAS if you're going to use them for a while. Now, for me, honestly, with the amount of data I've got, this is going to last me for several years. So I got the 2-year extended warranty on that. I also have a DS220 that I've had for a while that I started out with my photo backups. However, I shoot with a Canon R5. It's 45 megapixels. Those are rather large amounts of data to store, and it was taking up a lot of the space on my little 2-drive 220. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting a smaller unit like a 220. One of the things you can do for a 220 is you can go through and set it up so that the 220 has a RAID 1, which is a mirror. So if you had a drive in there that's 12 gigabytes, you'll have another drive in there of 12 gigabytes, and it copies everything to both drives. All right, so that's what RAID 1 does for you. If one drive fails, you have the other drive. You can immediately just swap the drive out and put it in. The mirror will copy from the healthy drive to the new drive, and you're set to go. And there's nothing wrong with having a small unit like that. When you have a 2-drive unit or something similar to it, you can't use RAID 5. RAID 5 requires at least 3 or more drives. So this gets you in, lets you get set up with what you need, and you have a backup situation, a backup solution running for you right out of the box. They're easy to set up. They have cloud-based ways if you want to get them from another computer over the internet, for example, or because it's a NAS, you can access this from other computers. And so if you've got if you wanted to use this as your primary work machine, you could do it. Bear in mind, again, RAID 5, because of the way it stripes across, is not going to be as quick as putting together like an SSD. So for example, if you're working on clients' photographs, you may want to use, if you're using Lightroom, for example, an SSD. Create your catalog on that SSD, dump all of your clients' photographs onto that SSD, all right? Do all your work, get all your stuff done, and then lift all that off and put it on the NAS. All right, so copy everything that you just did over onto the NAS, then you can clean that SSD off and use it for your next client. So that gives you a very high speed access. You're limited only by USB 3. The SSD will give you a quick response time, and you're good to go. Now, can you use SSDs in NAS? Yes, you can. SSDs have gotten cheaper, but they're still much more expensive to put together like a 60 terabyte or 44 terabyte box. Your physical hard drives are going to be, your platter hard drives are going to be much easier to work with from an expense standpoint. Both do have life expectancies to them, so it's not like the SSDs are going to last you forever. And again, if you're just using it for a backup, so you've got your high speed in there so you can make all your changes, you can do your work on your client's photographs, and you're done, then you can just bundle that entire thing up. Make a folder on the drive called whatever your client's name is or whatever identifier you use for that session, and just pop them over there, clean off your SSD, and you're good to go. And then you have a backup. Again, if you want to work on the pictures, you can just pick them up off the NAS, put it back on the SSD, and go, and then just copy them back again. There are certain tools in the Microsoft realm, it's Robocopy, that'll say, hey, these files are different, so I'm going to copy them over. For example, you worked on your client's files. Then they went, there's another couple of files, another couple of photos I'd like to get from you. You say, okay, I keep them for a year, 2 years, forever, whatever your retention policy is. You grab that entire folder off of your NAS, put it back on your SSD, work on it. Now, to copy it back, all you have to do is use something like Robocopy that'll say, okay, these files changed, the rest of them didn't. I'm just going to copy those back. So it makes it much better, a much faster way to copy them back to your NAS. And then you can clean your SSD off and go back to using it as your primary. I like to keep a couple of SSDs around for the purpose of working on my photographs. And again, SSDs have gotten cheaper. Keep in mind that you want your SSD, if you're going to use this client methodology, you want your SSD to be the size of the number of photographs that you're going to take, plus any copies, etc., that you're going to make. So you don't want your SSD to be too small because it won't be useful to you, but you don't want it to be too large. One of the things you could do, as an example, is have a regular drive as your primary, put your photos on there, and then cull the photographs. So you set up a drive that's got your backups to it that takes everything, for example. Cull the photographs and then pull them into something like Lightroom that then you can edit them there. They're all on the SSD and you don't have a 4,000 photographs sitting on your SSD. I have a tendency to shoot between 2,000 and 3,000 photographs in a few hours. Just the way I work, I like to do burst shooting of 5 photographs every time I pull the shutter down. So for me, I create a lot of photographs and I will cull them down. Sometimes it's the same person from different angles, and I just might like one angle better than the other, and I'll just pull one photo out of what could be 100 that I've taken. So look at your workflow and see what you can do to incorporate a NAS into that workflow, and that'll protect you going forward should you ever have a computer outage, right? Because if the computer goes offline, how are you going to get those files? What are you going to do to bring that stuff back and keep working? If everything that you need to work on is external to the computer, then all you have to do is light up a new computer or grab, let's say, your laptop, throw Lightroom or whatever you're working on that, connect the drives up to it, and go. With a NAS, because it's going over the Ethernet, it's cabled in already, so all of your computers can get to it to begin with, which makes it a little easier to work with than your local drives. But I will point out one thing. If you have local drives, get a labeler. Label your local drives with the letter that they are on your computer. And that's because if you were to hook that up to another computer, the other computer may give it a different drive letter, but Lightroom, in your catalog in Lightroom, knows the files by that drive letter path. And by having that drive letter on there, when you plug in your drive to another thing, or if you're grabbing it off the Ethernet, off the internet, your internal internet, you want that drive letter to be the same so that your catalog doesn't go hunting for it, get confused as to where the files are. It can just go get those files and continue running. So that's what I got for you guys this week. Again, use CrowdStrike as a wake-up call. Something could happen to your computer and kill it. And what are you going to do to get back on business? And what are you going to do to protect those precious memories that you've been recording? And I'll talk to you guys all next week.